Hi, and welcome to my channel. This is the first in a short series on some super rare items from the world of philately and how to tell whether yours is the genuine article, at least before paying to send them to be certified by a reputable expert, which I would always recommend if you want peace of mind. Today's video focuses on the very rare and expensive stamp from Switzerland issued in 1843 in the cantonal region of Geneva. This is referred to as the Double Geneva, and it's so rare that it's been extensively forged for many years. This video hopes to help you identify whether that stamp in your collection, or the one you're thinking of purchasing, is the real deal. Of course, printing methods, papers, inks, gum, cancellations, printing plate position, dimensions, and any repairs are all critical elements in proving it genuine and of the quality you are expecting. And that's where the real benefit of expertizing comes in. But I hope to show that there are some features that the forgers have failed to replicate, and following this guide, you stand a very good chance of avoiding a very expensive mistake. Before I start, just a little background on this wonderful stamp. Amongst the earliest postage stamps ever issued, with only Great Britain and Brazil having already issued official countrywide stamps, the three early Swiss cantonal stamps are amongst the most sought after, these being the Zurich 4 and 6 Rappen, the Double Geneva, and shortly afterwards the beautiful tricolor Basel dove. The Geneva stamp remains highly unusual in that it could be used whole, to cover postage across the entire canton, or just use one half of the stamp for use within the same locality. So really, it was two stamps in one. The heading span both stamps, and you'll see singles or half stamps from either side, usually also containing the part of the heading, but not in all cases. In very rare cases, a double stamp may cover the right and left stamps side by side, or even one half above the other. These are even greater rarities, so you must take extra care if you are thinking of acquiring one of these. Take-up by the people of Geneva was very poor, with the stamp even being reduced to 8 centimes, or 4 for each half. Even so, the numbers actually used were incredibly small. You should note that the designs of the left and right halves do differ, ever so slightly, but this video will concentrate on the left half. So should help you confirm your left half, or full stamp, if you are lucky enough to get one. I will return to this shortly, but it is worth pointing out a couple of very famous forgeries, and ones which might catch out the unwary philatelist. These forgeries are by Fournier and by Sperati. François Fournier lived from 1846 to 1917 and produced facsimiles of many stamps, initially to help collectors fill a gap, but these have often been misrepresented as the genuine item. John de Sperati lived between 1884 and 1957 and was an expert in reproducing stamps, often using genuine papers, chemically altering or removing original inks. He used his incredible talents to show that experts of the day could be fooled, and his originals are highly valued, just as known forgeries. His story is fascinating, and I highly recommend that you read further or seek out the YouTube videos on him. Whilst the Sperati forgeries are extremely close, my checklist should serve you well against these and other forged copies that have flooded the market. And finally, before I begin, it is worth noting a couple of useful sources. Firstly, the famous publication called Album Weeds by Rev. R.B. Erie, published by Stanley Gibbons in 1882. The significantly better publication, however, is Distinguishing Characteristics of Classic Stamps for 19th Century Europe by Hermann Schloss in 1951. Now, however, with easy online access to examples genuine and fake, we are in a better position than ever to go even further into the minutiae of the designs and eliminate 99% of the examples that might be costly mistakes. Point number 1. Okay, from top to bottom you'll notice that the top left outline is actually placed further left than the outline that runs to the bottom of the stamp. If they're flush, that's a key indicator of it being a fake. Point number 2. After the digits of 10 is a point. This is actually an oval rather than a perfect circle or even missing on some forged examples. Point number 3. The character P, in port, has extended lines to the left. It's possible some might just touch the vertical line, but in mine, there is a slight gap. Point number 4. The left terminal at the top of a letter T extends some distance downwards. Point number 5. The letter C, in port cantonal, is shorter than the other letters. Point number 6. The A in cantonal, separating the left and right halves, has no horizontal bar. Point number 7. The left inner border extends upwards to touch the thick outer border. Point number 8. The D in D has a pointed top which does not quite touch the inner border above it. Point number 9. The angular letter G in Geneva also does not touch the inner border above. Point number 10. The P in post touches the inner border on the left. Point number 11. Notice the detail in the rays coming from around the JHS text. In a lot of forgeries, there are fewer and more coarse lines. Point number 12. The accent over the E in Geneva is arced and a little distance above the primary character. Point number 13. The right vertical stroke in N in Tenebras does not reach the top of a character. Point number 14. The letter B is also taller than all of the other letters. Point number 15. There is 1 short and 3 tall lines at the edge of the main banner area. Point number 16. The U in Lux is quite thick. Point number 17. The edge of the banner touches the right inner border quite thickly. In some forgeries it is at a point or leaves a gap entirely. Point number 18. There is a thin feather below the top thick feather in the eagle's wing. Point number 19. The eagle has no eye. Whilst this may be due to the paper texture, forgeries commonly show the eagle with an eye. Point number 20. One of the most common errors in forgeries is the failure to have the leftmost of the 11 inner lines at a distinct angle, not actually reaching the frame of the shield. Point number 21. The small cross of the key has quite thin lines compared to some fakes. Point number 22. Note the pattern of dots underneath the eagle's wing. In many forgeries, these may have different numbers or are in different positions. Point number 23. Note how the line at the bottom of the ball and the ornate edge to the left are quite thick compared to the right, and there is no further shading or lines within that triangular area. Point number 24. The 8th internal vertical line within the right part of shield is bowed. Many forgeries show these lines as completely straight. Point number 25. On some particularly poor fakes, the point following the C is missing. Point number 26. The line joining the inner and outer borders of the shield is actually slightly to the left of the shield point. Point number 27. The L in local is even further left of the shield point. Finally, point number 28. Like at the top, the vertical inner border extends downward to meet the thick outer border. Now let's take a look at the Fournier forgery. We can clearly see that the point after the 10 is circular. The drops on the T of poured in the heading aren't quite right. The point at the top of the D in D is missing. The rays from JHS are not as detailed. The right stroke of the N in Tenebras is too tall. The U in Lux is thin. The eagle has an eye. The cross on the key is thick. There is an additional line within the triangular area under the ball of the key. And the line joining the inner and outer borders of the shield goes through the point rather than slightly to the left. Moving on to the much better Sperati forgery. The drops on the T poured in the heading are also not as deep. The point at the top of the D in D is touching the inner top border. The right stroke of the N of Tenebras isn't as obviously shorter. Without more examples of sparatus, it's difficult to really confirm with certainty as it's a really close copy. In this instance, the H in JHS just doesn't look the same either, with originals having shorter right strokes. Here's a forgery that I unfortunately fell for some time ago, prompting me to look in much greater detail than I'd done before. Firstly, it's missing the point after the 10. The P in port doesn't have the lines. The top of D is wrong. The left P in post isn't touching the border. The B in Tenebras is the same height as the other letters. The right banner is touching, but at just a point. The vertical lines in the right half of the shield are completely straight and vertical. That's without me spotting the purple facsimile imprint even with my magnifier. Give these a go against other forgeries that you can view online, and you'll soon be quite proficient in spotting the forgeries. But for such an expensive purchase, I thoroughly recommend you only paying the going rate for examples with reliable certificates, and make sure that that is not itself just a copy, and that the image is of the actual stamp you're looking at. You could also do what I did, which was buy from one of the world's most reliable specialist dealers, Honegger Philatelist, in Switzerland. They have an amazing selection, all accurately described with sound certificates. I'm not on commission or affiliated in any way, but if you want to add one of these to your collection, you could do much worse. Good luck with your collecting. I hope you like this video, and I hope to have others coming shortly, starting with the Basel Dove, also known as the Basler Taube.